Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Somerville. I'm the Chief of Party. I've met some of you. I want to thank you all for coming down to Lundazi for this week to work together on a refresher course for the way that Frankfurt Zoological Society and partners are collecting data around customary land documentation processes. This work is hugely important. And I think this training is very important to make sure that you are collecting the highest quality possible data, to make sure that you are really doing the work that benefits your communities in Chikwa and Chifunda chiefdoms. And I hope that through this course, you can identify some of the adaptations and changes that you need to make to ensure that your communities get the best information possible. If you don't follow through with this work, people in your chiefdom will receive the wrong documents, will have the wrong areas mapped, will have the wrong names on documents, may not be able to identify, to work with projects in the future, may not be able to benefit from future activities. So it is hugely important that you pay attention and really think about how to improve the data collection and the process being carried out right now. What I do want to do is to share a presentation. Pardon, I'm going to switch over to a different sharing so you won't see my face, to a presentation. I'm sorry that I don't have great graphics, but hopefully this will be useful for you. Okay, so over the next couple days, we really want Calma and Margaret to work with you to look at the skills in your performance so far on the field skills that you're using and support each other to develop those, particularly around map reading, particularly around the complete collection of data. We need you to completely understand the steps that are associated with customary land documentation so that you understand why you're collecting the data. We want you to work still with the ODK forms and see where there's some mistakes that are still being made along the way. We'd like you also to understand why the data is important and what it actually produces in the end, beyond just a certificate or a name on a map. And we also importantly want you to think about the process and some of the outcomes that you're working on, particularly around gender and women's rights and the rights of children, and also around the inclusiveness of the process for everyone. So, as you may all know, the Integrated Land and Resource Governance Program is partnering with a number of chiefdoms and partners around land documentation and capacity building with local stakeholders, including yourselves. We are supporting the Ministry of Lands on a policy and legislation so that this work can be accepted by government in the future. Right now, that is why your work is so important. If it's done well, this may become the law of Zambia. If it's done poorly, people will say, no, it doesn't work. Communities can't do this type of work. I believe that you and the communities can succeed. These activities are also seek to result in positive things. If you have a land document, we expect that you may be able to access extra finance, and we're working with folks on that. We expect that if the chiefdom has documentation, that we can support sustainable natural resource management by not encroaching into hunting areas, for example, or wildlife areas. If we have documentation, we expect that the chief will have to deal with fewer conflicts, that village headmen will not be able to take land away from widows or give land to someone else without due process. And we expect that this will empower not just women or men, but future generations to be able to have security that they know that this is their land and that they can work on it. That doesn't mean that because it's your land, you can do absolutely whatever you want, but it does give you some level of security. So, customary land documents. A lot of people think this is impossible. Our goal is to show that people can afford it, that you can collect high quality data, and that partners like Frankfurt Zoological Society, like your village land committees and head persons and indunas, that you can manage it yourselves. It doesn't need to have someone come in from Lusaka to tell you how to manage your land. The bolded things are things that I think we're really testing right now. In the future, we want to make sure that communities can keep the records up to date, and that's why we're working with you. We want to make sure that others can use this data too. Can government use the tools and products? Will the Department of Wildlife actually respect these and build off of them? We think so. Can communities access benefits? We're working in Chapata with a microfinance organization. We hope that if things go well, we could bring that to Lundazi. How can we use this process to improve the registration of community resource rights, including community forest management? I think you're working on it. Your partners are working on it. And then can these activities help to improve wildlife management? And that's really the reason that USAID is investing in Chikwa and Chifunda. How does this process help improve human-wildlife conflict, community rights in OGMA? I need to stress that the process is hugely important. It's not just about handing a piece of paper to a community member. It's about making sure it's done right. It's about making sure that all of the records and all of the people who have an interest in the land are recorded. It's about making sure people know what the information they're giving you and that they consent to it, that they know what and why they're giving you information. And therefore, it's important that you have good facilitation skills. It's also important to know that you are not necessarily the expert. You are there to record people's information. So the information from the ground is what is most important. And for me, the most important thing that is going to come out of this is making sure that the quality of your work is as high as possible. We need to talk about where mistakes are being made, how we can ensure that you're not making them in the future, so that people are getting the right documents with the right information, okay? And so that the paper forms that you use are matching. It's important that you understand that rights are not just about an individual having rights on a sheet of paper. Just because you have an individual right doesn't mean that the community doesn't also have rights to graze in your area during the dry season. The documents may give you stronger rights, but they don't give you absolute singular rights. There's still the influence of government. There's still the role of the head person. There's still the role of the chief. I believe that documents strengthen the rights of the household, but they do not exclude others automatically. Nevertheless, it's important to be as inclusive as possible. We want to avoid bad things. We want to avoid this process resulting in a chief or a head person saying, this person doesn't deserve land, or this person's rights are not there. We'd like this to open up a dialogue, a discussion between community members. We also want to make sure that existing prejudices aren't codified, that they aren't put onto paper. So that's why we are encouraging women to document their rights. We're encouraging the respect of the rights of widows. We want to make sure that this doesn't lead to just having men on certificates in the long runs. That makes a process for you to talk about with communities. We also want to avoid creating new hurdles for people. We want this to record land rights in the land institutions as they are now, not create a new requirement to go to the chief for absolutely everything. And we want to make sure that people's inheritance rights and rights as a future interest or a current interest, but not owner on the land, are recorded. And really, that is what the persons of interest is about. Because this is the first time we're documenting the rights, we want to make sure that we include as many people as possible. Now, it's important to know that this work right now is being partially funded by USAID, but the goal is to reduce the costs. The more time you have to go to the village, the more time you have to correct, that costs money, which right now may be partially borne by USAID, but in the future may not be there. So we need to be low cost. We need to recognize that the community members have the right to make decisions. We need to create an opportunity for review and objections by larger groups of people, not to correct spellings necessarily, but more for large objections. We need to engage everyone. This is not just a process for the village head person and a few people to make claims and to walk around and claim large pieces. It's for everyone to be involved. If you see someone who is not involved, you need to get them involved. We want to encourage local level dispute resolution. Now, disputes can be anything. I don't want to raise this as it's a wrangle or a place where someone's getting into a fight. A dispute could just be a disagreement or a lack of clarity over a boundary. USAID and ILRG is not rewarded, but we are judged based on, are we solving any problems? A local level dispute is a problem that people see this process resolving. So we're going to focus on collecting more data on that in the future. And we want to make sure this is not a discriminatory process. This should not lead to anybody being left out. The ways we do that are through transparency. That's why we have both paper records and records on the tablets. We need this to be consistent and replicable, that the way it's done in one village is the same as any other, and the way that it's done in Chifunda and Chikwa is the same that it will be done in Magodi or in Yamboyeta or Kaputa across other parts of the country. We need to make sure that people feel that their data is kept safe, that this process is relatively simple, and that it's sustainable, both in terms of cost and that you as community members can take a lead in doing it. And very importantly, we need to make sure that the records are complete. There is no use in giving a chief records on just half the chiefdom or just half the villages or just half of the community members or just people's names and not their birth date or NRC number or telephone number if they have it. We need to encourage completeness. At the same time, we have to recognize that this is voluntary. People can drop out. They do not have to participate. You should not be hearing threats. What I want to highlight here with respect to tools, you all know that we sort of have three sets of tools. We have technology in the tablets or phones that we use, and in the Garmin Glow GPS. Those are very important. That information and the quality of that information is what goes into the certificate immediately. That data needs to be 100% right every single time. We cannot afford, either in time or funds, for people to be entering data wrong into those records. Please understand that this is absolutely crucial. Paper maps are very important. The GPS records the location very accurately, but the paper maps are very important for understanding the references. You need to be looking between your tablet and the paper maps to identify where you are. And based on that, the digitizations occur. Based on that, the community knows where they are. Secondly, or thirdly, in paper, you have paper books that document the claims and the demarcations. These records need to be complete and they need to match the tablets and the GPS. You all know that the tablets collect information on Open Data Kit forms, that these forms are just like a paper form. Very much it's the same paper form. There's tick boxes, there's dates, and there's maps. You need to be an expert in using the maps. And that is large part of what Kaoma and Margaret will be working with you and James this week to make sure that you're doing the mapping correctly. We know that you can collect points and GPS points and collect the boundaries using the mapping function. I want you to focus heavily on how these maps in front of you, how you can reference them, not just by what it looks like underneath, but by the box and the grid that are created in your MB tiles. So this information, it's also hugely important to know that your information is not safe until you submit it. That information will then be submitted into the internet and will end up on a cloud, in the clouds, and then it's safe and secure. You need to be entering or submitting that data by the internet as frequently as possible. If that information does not get uploaded, does not get submitted, it could be lost. And we had a case of that earlier this year, I know. The Garmin glows capture coordinates. Now, if they fall in the river, they will stop working. If the battery dies for some reason, they will stop working. But they do not collect the wrong information. You need to learn consistently 100% of the time how to read the accuracy of these Garmin glows and how to make sure they are connected properly to your tablet. If your accuracy says 12 or 14 or something larger, it is likely, or anything larger than 4, frankly, it is likely, very likely, that you have not connected them correctly. Okay, thank you. They collect coordinates and they give us the exact location of where you were standing. The paper maps are critical. The paper maps are a reference for the community. We collect a number of different information on the paper maps, including community boundaries, including shared resources, including the parcels. Notice that each map has a square around it and a number in the middle, this map being 1331, D3, and the poly 3, 180. Those numbers are on the map, and they're for you to be able to reference, and you can find that number on your tablet. The paper forms. I know that on your tablet, oftentimes you have more information that you can put than in the paper forms. What I will say is that the paper forms are the bare minimum of information that must, everything on your paper form must match what is in the tablet. In the tablet, you should also be collecting additional information, which could include the phone number, which is very important. NRC numbers are very important. If you do not collect the NRC number or the phone number, these individuals may not be able to participate in future access to credit or finance. Notice for date of birth, it says 1939. If that person has an NRC number, their date of birth will be known and it will be on the NRC number. So anyone with an NRC should have more than just 1939 as their date of birth. Please note that. It's an important piece of information. So in summary for this piece, the data needs to be complete. If you submit partial data, if you submit misspellings, imagine how you would like it if your name was not on the certificate, if your name was spelled wrong, if your land was partially collected. Imagine being in the footsteps of the people you're working with. Secondly, the data on the paper and the tablet must match. Please note, though, that everything that goes on the tablet, there is additional information and you do need to collect it. That information is very important for people to be able to participate. We also need to recognize the need to be inclusive, to talk about getting more women, to talk about children and youth being put onto the certificates. We are judged based on our ability to be inclusive and supportive of these different interest groups. Finally, we want to identify and resolve disputes. Okay, we want to make sure that we are resolving any issues that are outstanding within the chiefdoms. And again, these disputes does not mean that there's a fight or a wrangle or an absolute boundary dispute. It's anything that's a problem or a challenge in the community that this process will solve. From there, I'm going to give you some time to talk. I want to thank you again for coming to this meeting, for participating, and just need to stress how important it is that you think about the data quality, that you think about making things 100% correct every time. Thank you, and we will be in touch soon. I will give you a, maybe I'll just share my desktop screen so you can see my beautiful picture of myself. I really wish I could be with you all today and this week. I know you're doing good work. I appreciate it. We appreciate it, but most of all, the chief and the community members themselves appreciate it. Good luck, and I'll see you soon.